Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be filming a super late 2019 reading statistics video. I meant to do this video at the beginning of January, like everyone means to, but I ended up getting sick at the beginning of January, and then there were all of these other end of the year, beginning of the year videos I wanted to make, and so this one just ended up getting pushed back. And I guess I could have just skipped this video, but then I felt like all of that reading tracking would have just gone to waste, so I still wanted to make it. Hopefully y'all still want to hear about some statistics. I enjoy statistics all year round, so hopefully you will too. If I'm looking down here, it's because I've got my laptop here, that's where all of the stuff is, so I'm just going to be reading it off of my laptop, so that's why I'm looking down a lot in this video, but let's just jump right into it. Hopefully I'll have some little graphics I can put above the screen of the different statistics, so let's just dive right in. First up, I guess we can talk about my reading challenge. So I had initially set my Goodreads reading challenge to 80 books, which I thought I'd be able to complete because I've done it twice before, but alas, I was unable to. But when I saw myself falling pretty far behind, I ended up setting the challenge back to 70 books, and when I saw I was falling even more behind, I decided to set it back to 65 books, and in the end I read a grand total of 68 books in 2019, which is like a fine amount, but not as much as I wanted it to be, so I'm a little disappointed about that. And with those 68 books, I read approximately 20,463 pages. I then broke my reading down by month so we could kind of see what months I did better. So in January, I read 5 books, February 6 books, March 6 books, April 4, May 5, June 3, July 7, August 4, September 4, October 11, November 9, and December 4. So my best reading months by far were October and November, when I read a grand total in those 2 months of 20 books, and my worst month was June, when I only read 3 books. So I started off at like a steady pace at the beginning of the year, and then it definitely dropped, and then it got a little better, and then it dropped again, and then it got a little better, and then it dropped again, and then it got really good, and then it dropped again. So it was a lot of ups and downs, that's fine. Of all of the books I read, 45 of them were standalones and 23 of them were a part of a series. This is actually pretty interesting to me because I feel like in comparison to other years, which I didn't keep track of this, but if I did, I feel like the series would have been a lot bigger. If not, it would have been completely flipped, because usually I was reading a lot of YA, and that's a lot of series, whereas this year I very much focused on adult books, which we'll see when we get to that little statistic, but I very much focused on adult books, which tend to be more standalones, and I also just figured out that I have a lot of commitment issues with series in 2019, so I didn't end up picking up a lot of series, and I kind of sought out standalone books. I just realized I probably don't have a whole lot of room on the screen for these graphics, so I'm gonna move over just a little bit more. So now let's move on to the different genres that I read in 2019. So I read 5 classics, 13 contemporary stories, 8 fantasies, 7 historical fictions, 11 horrors, 4 mysteries, 6 nonfiction books, 4 science fiction books, 2 short stories, one of which was a poetry collection, and 8 thrillers. So overall, it was pretty diverse with my reading genres. However, if you'll notice, there's one particular genre that is missing that I used to read a lot of because it's one of my favorite genres, and that is dystopians. I did not read one dystopian in 2019. What is up with that? Obviously, some of these genres can be kind of interchangeable with each other, and there are some books that could fit into multiple genres, so I just kind of categorized them as best as I could. So there were some science fiction books that were set in the future, but I wouldn't consider them to be dystopian, because for me dystopian is very much just like future society, like The Hunger Games or Divergent, that kind of thing, whereas a lot of the science fiction books I read this year were set in the future, but they were more space, if that makes sense. I also have a hard time categorizing when I read classic books, because obviously you can read a classic, but it can also be a horror or it can be a romance novel. So let me know in the comments when you read a classic what you categorize it as, because a lot of people use classic as a genre, but then there's all of these other genres it could very easily fit into. So let me know in the comments what you guys do for that. One thing I am a little bit shocked about looking at this is that contemporary was my most read genre, and I mean like contemporary romance, which a couple years ago I would not have been caught dead with a contemporary romance book, so that's really strange to see that as my most read genre. Now we're going to go into my ratings. So in 2019 I gave 0 books 1 star, 2 1.5 stars, 8 2 stars, 5 2.5 stars, 9 3 stars, 7 3.5 stars, 23 4 stars, 9 4.5 stars, and 5 5-star reads. So I gave 0 books 1 star. I feel like I should probably explain that a little bit. So I have very much realized that life is too short to read books you don't enjoy. So at this point, if I'm reading a book and I'm really not enjoying it and it's probably going to be a 1-star read, I end up DNFing it, and then that book never really ends up getting rated or added to my Goodreads as a read book, which I know some people do. I personally don't like to do that because unless I've read a book completely to the end, I don't want to rate it, because what if the ending was amazing and I missed out? That's on me, so I don't want to give it 1 star having not read the full work. So that is why there are 0 1-star reads. Obviously there were 2 books that I gave 1.5 star that I did end up just finishing, probably because they were like really short and I was just like, whatever, I'll just finish it. One thing that is a little bit weird is that I gave 23 books 4 stars and 9 4.5 stars and 5 5 stars. That is a lot of books that I gave very high ratings, but when I like think back on my year, I don't feel like I read that many books that I like really loved, like up in the 4 or 5 star range. I should go back and reassess some of my ratings for these books, but 23 books is a lot of books to give 4 stars. I only gave 9 books 3 stars, which I thought that the kind of mediocre range would have been my highest rating, but that's that. Now going into the formats of the books I read, 61 of them were physical books, 5 were ebooks, and 2 of them were audiobooks. This is not surprising at all. In fact, it's kind of shocking how many audio and ebooks that I read, because usually I don't read from them at all. But yeah, I like to read physical books. It's just more fun. That's like half the fun, is just flipping the pages and like sniffing the pages. I don't know. And then we have the age range for the books that I read. So 32 of the books I read were adult, 31 were young adult, and 5 of them were middle grade. So like I said, I definitely reached for a lot of adult books this year, and at first I didn't even really realize that I was doing it. I was just picking up what I felt interested in, and there were just a lot of adult books that caught my interest last year. So it's, I mean, 32 to 31, it was basically 50-50 with adult and YA books. This is probably the most adult books I've ever read in a year, so I feel like I am definitely kind of moving up from YA, and adult will be like my main age range to read from, but I still plan to read a lot of YA. There are still a lot of YA authors that I really, really love and really want to read this year, so I feel like if we do the statistics video again next year, hopefully in January, I feel like the statistic will be about the same, 50-50. That's what I'm hope to go for this year. And then the final statistic I don't have a graphic for because I literally just tallied it up in my notebook, and that is how many library books I read and how many books I read that I had already owned. So in 2019, I ended up reading 32 books that I already owned and 36 books I got from the library. So again, it's not that far off. It's basically 50-50, but I got more books from the library. So I feel pretty good about this statistic, that I read a lot of books that I owned, but I also utilized my library a lot, which I think is important. So I'm pretty happy with how that came out, and I hope that it is the same this year. So yeah, that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed these little statistics, even though they were really, really late. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?